100% you have to be focused on the process of getting there. You can't be thinking about just the end result and how far away from your end result. And this is where the real power of tracking your progress comes into play. Because then you can see, okay, well, I've had, let's take, lifting weights, for example. Like if, my goal is to bench 300 pounds and I'm only benching 250 pounds, I might be really bummed out and sad that I'm not hitting it. But if I look back on my workouts and I've seen, okay, I've improved this week, I improved that week, got a little bit better this week, you start to see where the progress is happening. And that's why I think it's almost fundamental that you have some sort of system in your life for tracking your personal development progress.
I'm Srini Rao, and this is the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where you get a window into the stories and insights of the most innovative and creative minds who've started movements, built thriving businesses, written best-selling books, and created insanely interesting art. For more, check out our 500-episode archive at unmistakablecreative.com. Ben, welcome to the Unmistakable Creative. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Srini, thank you for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it is really, really cool to have you here. I came across your story by way of our mutual friend, Matt Monroe, who mentioned you to me, and he said, you really should talk to Ben. He's like an up-and-coming Tim Ferriss. Every now and then I'll reach out to our listeners for guest recommendations, and your name rose to the top of the list. So it is really, really cool to have you here. And on that note, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your story, your journey, your background, and how that has led you to all the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say my story and how I ended up creating Stop Start 2 actually goes back about 7 years or so. So this is the time, 2008, 2009. Housing market has crashed. The world's economy is in the tank. I am a recent college graduate, and I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out, what direction I want to take my life, what things I want to do, and I'm trying to start my career. So I have a physics undergraduate degree, and I'm trying to begin a career as an engineer. So I've applied at well over 150 different positions, and I've been rejected by every single one of them. And I'm just facing rejection. Every single day I'm sitting down and writing cover letters and resumes and applying for jobs. I'm getting rejected by everyone just because there's literally no job for me to get at that point in time. And simultaneously, while this is going on, my girlfriend, Michelle, is really struggling with her health. She has a very rare autonomic nervous system disorder called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And what this means is that her parasympathetic nervous system, so all of her body's automatic processes don't really work really well. So blood pressure regulation, pain management, energy, things like that. Her body just doesn't do it very well. And because her condition is so rare, no doctor can really figure out how to help her. So she's struggling, and we keep going to all these different doctor's visits, and they just keep prescribing more medication, more pills. And it's like every person we talk to, they're just trying to push their latest drug on us. And things get bad, and I get extremely frustrated with the way things work. I'm upset that the doctors haven't figured out her condition. I'm mad at my professors for not preparing me for this new world that I'm in. I'm mad at the government for not fixing the economy. And I'm blaming everyone and really not taking any responsibility for what I was doing. So I got really upset and frustrated and ended up taking a really crappy job that I hated. And then I ended up going back to graduate school. And I remember the moment that I started to take responsibility for my life extremely clearly. So I'd gone back to graduate school, and I'm sitting in one of my classes, and it's a research class. So I realized very quickly that I have access to the same information that all of these doctors do who are trying to help Michelle. It's just they haven't read the research papers. They haven't done the work to figure out how to help her. So I start there. I dive into the research. I start putting the keywords for her condition. And I have no idea what any of these research papers say. Like, I can't even read them. So I just have to start there. And I'm going through these papers. I'm highlighting notes. I'm trying to figure it out. And that moment, I realized, like, I could figure this out. I didn't have to wait for the doctors to figure things out for her. And because I started taking responsibility for what was happening in our lives, and specifically with her health, I realized that I could take the same approach and start applying it to everything else in my life. So now, fast forward a few years, I've been working on myself. I got the job figured out. I've got things going on, but I realized that there's something really missing from my life. So I had gotten the job, I had the apartment, I had all the things that I really thought were going to make me happy. The granite countertops, the big screen TV, the big couch, and I'm sitting in my apartment looking at all my stuff, and I made this just realization that none of these things that I thought were going to make me happy made me happy. And I realized that I needed to start making some changes right then and there. So shortly after that, I launched my first blog, which was primarily a health and fitness blog. So I was talking about fat loss, muscle gain, how we can improve our lives by, improving our health. And I was making these diet and fitness plans for people. Now, this time in my life, I was really into the whole health and fitness scene. I was listening to, several hours of podcasts each day. I was doing a ton of research, and I was literally writing the best programming and training and workout routines for people. And I kept writing these routines for people, and I realized after a time that they were failing. So they would make progress for a little bit, and then they would fail. And make progress for a little bit, and then they would fail. They'd make progress for a little bit, and then they would fail. This kept happening over and over and over again. And I realized that it wasn't the information that people were struggling with. It was the formation of the habits that allowed them to achieve the results that they wanted. So that really made me double back and say, okay, I need to shift focus here. It's not health and fitness and the how-to that's the problem. It's people taking the application of this information than actually doing it. Because knowing what to do is not a hard thing, but actually doing it, that's the hard part. So that's when I started really diving into the research of how we form habits and how we can implement them in our lives and how we can ultimately create change, understanding how habits are made. So when you look at Stop, Start, Do, it's really a tool for people who don't want to rely on willpower in order to get something done. But if they learn the basic frameworks for how to change their habits, that's the greatest way to create change for them.
Awesome. All right. So that raises tons of questions, as you might imagine. So I want to talk briefly about the journey before the journey, childhood, parents, mentors, influences. I mean, when you look back at your life, are there significant moments or inflection points that you think ultimately led you down this path of helping people to change their habits and using that to change their lives?
Yeah, definitely. So I look back at my first goals as a kid. So let me take you back to Ben Austin in preschool. I'm 5 years old, and my life goals for that time are, number one, no unhappy people in the world. I want to make everybody happy. Number two, I want to cure cancer. And then number three, I forgot what number three was, but you get the point. I had these very big goals where I wanted to change the world. I wanted to have an impact. And it's strange for me looking back at those goals when I was younger, because I realized very quickly that the work I'm doing is influenced by those same feelings that I had when I was younger. So I look at the reasons why I created Stop, Start, Do, the reasons why I continue to work on it. And it's really my desire to have an impact and create change on a mass scale. And I see, I don't know, it's really weird when you look back on your life and you start to see these decisions that you've made and you see how they've aligned with what you would consider to be your purpose or your mission in life. And it's really interesting for me to see how when I was young, I had a very clear idea about what I wanted to do with my life. And then as I got older, I fell off the path. I went down this career path that maybe wasn't the right fit for me for the wrong reasons. It was societal pressures. I did it because I thought I would make more money. It was all these things. And the work that I'm doing right now is very much a transition from me getting back on that initial journey that I started when I was little.
Why do you think people lose that clarity and fall off the path themselves, and how do they get back, especially if they're way later in life than you are?
Yeah, well, I think it's very natural for us to fall off the path. It happens to, I think, most people at least one time or another. And that's because society is always pulling you towards back to the norm, right? And the norm is to get the 9-to-5 job and get married and buy a house and do that. And it's really hard, especially when you're starting out, to do something that's different than your friends and your peers. because this is something I've experienced in the past couple of years, me doing something different. It's not that people don't like what you're doing, but it almost shows them what they could be doing if they decided to live different. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you're almost a reflection of all the things that they could have done. And actually, one of my buddies recently drunkenly admitted to me that my recent success is, it's hard for him because it shows him everything that he could be doing. And it's hard to hear that, right? Because, yeah, I guess I don't know where to take that one.
I do. How do you maintain relationships with people in your life at the same time while pursuing what matters to you?
I'll tell you, that's actually a pretty good question. I was talking to one of my buddies about that recently, Michael Roderick of Small Pond Enterprises. And essentially what he was saying is like, when you're starting out as an entrepreneur, you're starting out your own business, you're doing things differently. If you go back into those groups where the social pressure is such that, they're all going to gang up on you. So like if I go back into my group of buddies that, I've known since forever, they're almost going to kind of all gang up on me because that's sort of like what the norm is in the group. But if I have conversations with them one-on-one, those dynamics don't really happen within the conversation. So it's like you just need to isolate them one-on-one and then also bring them into your world, right? Mm-hmm. You've got different people. I've got lots of friends now that are entrepreneurs. And like, if I invite them all to hang out, my friend who may have been, not so happy with me, previously in the big group setting, I bring him back, in this new setting with the entrepreneurs. He's not going to have that same behavior against me, I guess is the best way I could put it.
Mm. One of the things that's really interesting is you mentioned getting rejected from 150 jobs out of college. I mean, I graduated business school right around the same time that you finished undergrad. I don't know if I applied to 150 jobs. I might have given up before 150. But the question that raises for me is how you maintain morale when you're going through something very difficult in your life. Because, I mean, when you get out of college, not being able to find a job feels like the worst thing in the world. When you get a bit older, somebody dies and you're like, oh shit, not getting a job out of college was, pales in comparison.
Right, exactly.
But I think the same sort of, way of dealing with it applies here because what you're talking about is dealing with what seems to be an incredibly difficult period of your life. And so I'm curious, how you maintain morale through something like that.
Yeah, I mean, 100% you have to be focused on the process of getting there. You can't be thinking about just the end result and how far away from your end result. And this is where the real power of tracking your progress comes into play. Because then you can see, okay, well, I've had, let's take, lifting weights, for example. Like if, my goal is to bench 300 pounds and I'm only benching 250 pounds, I might be really bummed out and sad that I'm not hitting it. But if I look back on my workouts and I've seen, okay, I've improved this week, I improved that week, got a little bit better this week, you start to see where the progress is happening. And that's why I think it's almost fundamental that you have some sort of system in your life for tracking your personal development progress. Now, you can take a number of different ways of doing this. You can journal, which I think is a fantastic way of tracking your progress. You can look back at your thoughts and see what you were thinking, back when. You could do a video blog of yourself and you use that. Me personally, I use a spreadsheet to track how I'm spending my time, how I am accomplishing all the different tasks and habits that I have to do. And then am I doing them consistently? And if not, why? So if I look back on the past week and for whatever reason I've missed or, I've eaten bad food that whole week for whatever reason, I want to know why. If I go back in the previous week, it's probably because I didn't sleep well that week. And I know that. So I'm like, okay, well, this week, I need to get better quality sleep. I need to change a couple of things. And then I'm able to make those changes. And that only really happens if you have the data there to support it. So like I said, not everybody needs to do things the exact same way that I do, but you need to have some sort of system in your life where you're measuring progress.
So you think measuring progress basically takes you out of the mental funk of, not realize or feeling like you're not at the end result that you're seeking?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can see the progress that's happening. I know you felt this in your own personal goals that you set, but like if you look at something that you want and you don't have it, you kind of go, I'm not there yet, And then you start to get down on yourself because you're constantly comparing what you've done versus what you don't have. And you almost build this self-image of yourself around someone who's not an achiever, someone who hasn't been able to achieve their goal that they want. But if you break it down to small steps, kind of like I do with the habit tracking spreadsheet, I just see, did I do it today? Yes or no? And I see the progress that's happening towards that goal.
Mm-hmm. So we'll get into the entire framework for Stop Start in a lot more depth. But I want to ask you a couple other questions. One is around this decision to shift from blame to responsibility. And I'm really interested in, one, why you think you were as self-aware at such a young age to do that as you were, like what in your life enabled that? And then, of course, how do other people move from a place of blame to a place of taking responsibility in their own lives?
Yeah, for me, it was just sheer pain of the way I was living. And I was experiencing such tremendous guilt and shame and anger towards the way things were that I pretty much had no choice but to change. Like things had gotten so bad that the only real option was to change and to take responsibility, because clearly blaming other people at that point in my life wasn't doing anything. It wasn't accomplishing anything. And Srini, I think the worst part about it is you feel powerless. You feel like you don't have any power to change anything. You don't feel like you can do anything. And I can't really say why I was able to do it, at age 21 or 22 or whatever it was. But I just know for me, there was just so much frustration built up that I was like, you know what? Things got to change. I don't know what it is, but I just got to do things differently right now. And that was like the thing that ultimately catapulted me towards change. But we don't all need to get to that breaking point where things get so bad that you have to change. Like you can actually create your own reasons for creating change in your life without having all the bad things happen to you. Like your environment doesn't need to crush you in order to change. You don't need to have a heart attack in order to change. You don't need to have a stroke before you change, right? And one of the techniques that I use specifically with clients and people that I work with is called the motivational seesaw technique. Now, this technique uses 10 different questions. So how it works is this. You write out whatever goal you want, and then you write down 10 different reasons why you want that goal. Like what are the immediate pleasurable things that you want to get out of achieving this goal? Next, you write down 10 negative things that are going to happen if you fail to take action and don't do it. So now what you're doing is creating negative motivation and positive motivation, and the seesaw can tip in your favor. And I've done this with a variety of different people. And what I notice is that the first time they do it, they haven't really dove in deep enough. Like they need to go a couple levels deeper. So they might send back their results to me and I say, okay, we got a good start here. Let's dive deeper. What's really the reason why you want to lose 30 pounds? What's really the reason why you want to start your business? What's really the reason why you want to become a world famous writer? Or, whatever it is for that person. And, that's when that second time through is usually when the real reasons start to pop up. For whatever reason, it's not the first time, but it's the second time that people can gain enough motivation and leverage on themselves in order to change.
So I don't know about you, but vacuuming is not one of those things that I ever look forward to doing. But as you know, your environment has a huge impact on your creativity. So I still like it to be clean wherever I'm living and working. But now it doesn't have to be something that you deal with. If you're like me and you grew up in the 80s, you probably fantasized about the day when cleaning your house would be like it was for the Jetsons, meaning you don't have to lift a finger. Well, the good news is that we're already kind of living in that future. And the easiest way to make sure your floors are clean every day is with the iRobot Roomba Robot Vacuum. It cleans up after itself. The Clean Base automatic dirt disposal takes convenience to a new level, automatically empties its own bin into an allergen lock bag that holds 60 days of debris and traps 99% of pollen, mold, and dust mites, so you can forget about vacuuming for months at a time. Let the Roomba clean for you instead. It learns your home, finds dirt, and empties itself on its own. It's got powerful cleaning performance made effortless. Remember, if it's not from iRobot, it's not a Roomba. To learn more, go to irobot.com/unmistakable. What surprised you in their answers and what surprised them?
I think, I hate to say this, but I think most of us are just sort of living at the surface level of thought. We're kind of in the habit of going throughout our daily routines. Nothing is really changing for us. We don't have an eye on the end result. And it's really hard to dive and start to understand what is the fundamental structures that support our beliefs, why we want to do things. Because you talk to anybody and they're like, oh yeah, I want to lose weight. And then you ask them why, and they look at you like you're crazy. Right? They're like, wait, why would you ask me that? Of course I want to lose weight. There's no reason why. And it's really hard to dive deep and figure out why people are or what's their motivation for change.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I've looked very recently at some of the things that I had set as goals, and I kind of looked at them. I was like, I don't know why I want these things at certain moments. I'm like, wow, these are sort of arbitrarily set. Like you said, a monetary goal, and I thought about it. I was like, wait a minute, what are we going to actually do with that money? Maybe we should start there instead. And this is something that I did with my business partner. I said, okay, let's make a list of every single thing we want to do and see how much money it would cost. And I think the cost was actually shockingly low to us, but it was kind of surprising. We're like, wait a minute, if we're working towards this, the goal that we've set is kind of out of alignment with this.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you're setting a monetary goal, but it's not in alignment with your daily actions and habits in order to get it. Is that what you're saying?
No. I mean, it's not actually aligned with what we're like. The end we had in mind was not even on the table. It was like the end was just okay, make X number of dollars. But we're like, wait a minute, we like just the sheer act of asking why and what the hell are you going to do with all that money? It really kind of opens your eyes up to a lot of different things. You're kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not as much as I thought it was going to be, or It's just a very eye-opening exercise to really understand why you want something.
Absolutely, yeah, because you start to really, like, you'll write something down and you're like, holy shit, I didn't know that that's the reason why I want to do that. I mean, let me give you an example. So last year, I wanted to start a habit where I was giving a speech to my phone every day. Like, I was just riffing on a subject that I was working on, trying to talk about it, trying to improve my public speaking skills. And when I sat down to wrote down why I wanted it, I realized that, okay, I want to start doing more public speaking, and I want that to be a big part of my career. And ultimately, I learned that I want to start a podcast just from doing this exercise. But I didn't really know that. Like, I kind of knew it, but I didn't really know it until I had gone through the process of writing these things down and figuring it out, kind of like you guys did.
So one of the questions I have for you is, you mentioned that the first 10 people that you had worked with actually failed with the changes that you wanted them to make. And I think the natural tendency for a lot of people in a moment like that is to say, I'm a failure because the people that I tried to work with failed. And it seems like you didn't. So I'm curious, what enabled that?
Yeah, no, I think you're bringing up a really good point. There's a huge difference in between I failed and I'm a failure. I think the real dangerous thing to start saying is I'm a failure, or I can't do this, or I'm not capable of doing this. But if you just say, okay, this time didn't work out, what could I do differently next time in order to try a new approach? Because going back to the responsibility piece that we were talking about earlier, I looked at their inability to make change and I said, okay, well, it didn't work out. Clearly, there's something I'm doing wrong here. It's not their fault. 10 people don't fail randomly. Something I'm doing is wrong. What can I do differently? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that makes a perfect setup to start talking specifically about the stop, start, do framework. Because, what's interesting to me, is that we've carried people through so many different frameworks for making changes in their lives on this show. We've brought in people from every perspective imaginable. And one, the changes are always different that people make because we rarely provide prescriptive advice. And two, certain conversations resonate with certain people in certain ways. So I really would love to walk through this entire framework of stop, start, do, and how it's used to change behavior and change habits.
Absolutely. Maybe we should pick a habit and then work from there, because it works really well for something that you want to implement in your daily routine. So I'll just give you an example from my personal history. I wanted to start a gratitude journal habit. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I wanted to do. Okay, so I already mentioned earlier that I have a spreadsheet that tracks whether or not I did it, and that's a big part of it. But before we start talking about that, let's understand that there's a sort of three component framework to implementing any new habit. First, you have the cue, then you have the routine, then you have the reward. So an example of this is my phone rings. That's the cue. The routine is I pick it up to see who texted me. And the reward is, it's a friend who's saying hello or something funny to me. Like, if that cycle repeats itself enough, it becomes a habit. Okay, so let's go back to the gratitude journal example. So I want to start a gratitude journal, and I realize that there's a lot of benefit to doing so. I'm in the research. I'm like, okay, there's good reason here for doing this. So what I do first is I do that motivational seesaw technique that we talked about earlier. So 10 reasons why I want to do it, and then 10 things that are going to happen if I fail to do this. So I already have leverage and motivation for starting it out. Now I need to pick a cue, and then the routine, and then the reward. Okay, so the cue for me is I wake up in the morning, my alarm goes off, that's my cue. First thing I do is I grab my gratitude journal. I sit down and I do it. And my reward is I drink coffee after that. I don't allow myself to drink coffee unless I have done it. And using just that simple framework of, okay, I wake up, grab the gratitude journal, that's going to compel me to do that every single day without fail. And the coffee is awesome because I love coffee. That's a huge reward for me. And it really reinforces this pattern loop. So now I have the motivation for doing it, and then I'm also creating the habit framework structure in order to do it. And then finally, I'm checking in with myself, towards the end of the day, did I actually do it? It's in my spreadsheet, and I get a little checkbox there. I'm like, yes, that's another reward for doing the right thing at the end of the day. So that's an example of how I've used this framework in order to create change and implement new habits and routines into my life.
Okay. It's interesting because that sounds almost identical to my meditation habit. I brew coffee, but I meditate before I drink the coffee. And
nice.
It might be the reason why I've actually stuck with the meditation habit.
So it probably is. And there's actually a reason for that. Coffee is a huge trigger of dopamine in the brain. I mean, you just get this like simultaneous release of all these pleasure chemicals in your brain. And that's a really strong way to reward any new habit. So I've used coffee. I've used vanilla extract. I've used other good smelling scents in order to create an immediate reward following a routine that I want to make. But then I've also done things like using music, using a song that I like, because it creates a good association to this new habit that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But then also you can just give yourself a congratulations, like, yes, I did it. I mean, sometimes that's strong enough. But really you have to find those things that really reward and motivate you. And those will ultimately be the ones that allow you to take this new habit that you want and make it something that sticks.
So a couple of questions come from that. You said there's a difference between knowing and doing something, and knowing what we do about habits, because I don't think that this is the first time a lot of people are hearing a lot of this message. Why do people still have such a hard time changing habits? Like, where do they go wrong with this?
Honestly, I think the first thing that they do wrong is relying entirely on willpower in order to implement anything new in their life. So, like, let's take the average New Year's resolutioner, for example. So this average New Year's resolutioner, they want to lose 30 pounds. They want to eat nothing but low-fat yogurt and granola, and they want to spend more time with their family. They want to work less. They want to sleep more. And they're implementing 25 new things that they want to do in their life right now. Yeah. Now, all 25 of those things are simultaneously taxing their willpower. And for those of you who don't know, your willpower is a finite resource. It's sort of like your battery on your iPhone. It drains and it goes down over time. And each of these new behaviors that you're doing is not a habit then. Okay? You set the bar for success so high that you're literally going to fail at some point in time. And slowly over time, you keep doing all these things and you're draining your willpower and you're draining your willpower. This is the reason why you see people have success with a new diet and exercise program for like a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then they fall off. Their willpower is drained to the point where they can't keep going anymore. And you know what? These people look tired. I've seen it over and over and over again. And I'm sure you have as well.
Oh, yeah.
Week number 2, they hit the wall and boom. And then, because they've set the bar for success so high, like they claim that they're going to work out for an hour every day that week. And then they don't do that. And they go, oh, shit, I failed. I didn't do it. Well, the rest of these things that I wanted to do, I guess I don't need to do them either. And it sort of starts this negative spiral. So I always say you have to start from the opposite perspective. You got to baby step it. You got to set the criteria for success so low that you can't fail. So if you want to start a running habit, don't make your criteria for success, I'm going to run every day for an hour. Your criteria for success is I have to put on my shoes. Right? You got to make it so easy, because once you get your shoes on, you get them on, you're like, okay, well,
I might as well go out the door.
I might as well go out the door. And then you go out the door and you're like, okay, well, I'm walking now. I guess I might as well go out to the end of the block. And you go to the end of the block and you're like, okay, well, that wasn't so bad either. I might as well keep going. And you build up enough momentum. But if you start that day by saying, okay, I have to exercise for an hour, you're dreading it, right? You don't want to do it. And I've been doing this now for 6-7 years. Yeah. And every single day I have to use the same approach for myself, because I get home at the end of the day and I'm exhausted, but I still committed to working out. And I'm like, you know what? I just have to put on my shoes. That's my only criteria for success. And I put them on and I'm like, okay, well, I'm here. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we can sort of baby ourselves and we can lower the criteria for success so low that we can't fail, that's when the momentum will take over. But I just think we set the bar too high. We try to do too much. We tax willpower to the point where it's no longer available and we can't make change.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think everybody knows I read 1,000 words a day. And I always tell people, I'm like, probably 95% of it is crap. Because
right.
most of it is like the only goal I have is to hit that word count. That's it. That's how low the bar is set.
Really? Okay. See, I set the bar even lower than that. I'm like, did I open up my word processor? And that's it.
Well, because I've got, for me, it's a habit at this point. Like I do it as frequently as brushing my teeth. Like I can't not do it anymore.
Yeah, I'm the same way, but like I just set my criteria for success that much lower because if I say 1,000 words, there's going to be times where I'm tired and I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm burned out right now. It's the end of the day. I got nothing left in the tank. How could I possibly do this? And part of this is probably, Srini, I have like 25 of these different things that I'm trying to do over the course of a day.
Uh-huh.
Some of them are very simple, like, did I eat good quality food? And, was I nice to my wife today? Was I grateful? Things like that. But then some of them are a little bit more involved. They take time. Mm-hmm. And the more of those things that stack up on top of each other, it starts to look like a huge chore. So I just need to cut it down to the most minuscule slice of something that I can do right now.
Mm. So you've mentioned willpower multiple times. So I want to talk briefly about how you've eliminated what is known as decision fatigue from your life, because I know decision fatigue plays a big role in willpower.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what mechanisms have you put in place in your life to eliminate decision fatigue, and how can people do the same?
Yeah, well, first of all, you want to eliminate as many minuscule decisions as possible. So for me, I set my life up in such a way where, like, I have a cleaning lady now. I don't want to clean anymore. That's a huge drain on willpower for myself. So I don't want to do that. I've eliminated that part of my life. Simple things like going to the grocery store or going to run errands. I hate running errands. I don't like doing them. That's a huge drain on my willpower. So I just do everything on Amazon. I have all that taken care of. So that's just one example. Just I'm taking care of these small things throughout the day so I can concentrate on bigger ones. But then on top of that, it's setting up the habit in such a way that you're not thinking about it. So earlier you mentioned you've created this habit of writing 1,000 words a day, and it's something that you don't even think about doing anymore. Mm-hmm. And that is ultimately the goal that you want. You don't want to be thinking about this stuff anymore. But if you set up the habit correctly, and you've done the work on the front end, it makes everything on the back end much easier. So I've had weeks where I literally do 100% of everything that I said I was going to do just because I set up the habit correctly. But it's always the times that I didn't do the work up front, that's when I fail. Mm-hmm. And even me, like I have to keep reminding myself to do all these little things in the front end, and that's what's hard. But once you do that, you can eliminate the decision-making fatigue and really not let it bog you down. Because you're right, willpower is a finite resource. And once you're zapped, like it takes a long time to come back. Uh-huh. We've all had those periods where it's Friday night and we're drained and we can't even pick a movie on Netflix to watch because we're so tired. There's like no decision-making muscle left at all. And you just sit there kind of in a dur state. And that's when you know you've gone too far. Like you can't keep pushing past that point. Yeah. At that point, it's eat good food, get some rest, go to bed. Because one thing that people don't understand is that willpower is also related to your body's ability to regulate blood glucose. Okay. So if you've been eating crappy food throughout the day, your blood sugar is going to be going up, it's going to be going down, and your own ability to regulate that is not there. Okay. And your willpower is tied to that. So when your blood sugar drops, so does your willpower. And this is the reason why you see people reaching for snacks later on in the day, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're reaching for the candy bowl, they got the donuts out, things like that. Your willpower is always going to be highest in the morning. So this is one of the reasons why I say, do your hardest thing first thing in the morning. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be putting off, like I know for me, meditation and gratitude journal are the two hardest things that I've done or that I do throughout the day. And I honestly, I say that like those things are very hard for me to do because they do use a lot of energy and they're hard. Like, I know it sounds crazy I've been meditating now for 5-6 years, but it's still like the hardest thing I have to do every day. And if I don't do it in the morning, it's not going to happen later on at night. Mm-hmm. So even though I've got the habit built, you want to do your hardest things first thing in the morning. And then later on at night, you can chill out.
I think what's really interesting to me about this is that you, with the in-depth knowledge that you have about all of this, still have the same potential tendencies to fall victim to the things that every normal human being does. Like, you're not just a machine.
No, there is no cure. I think it's funny you bring this up because people oftentimes think that if they achieve this result, their life is going to be complete. They make X amount of dollars, everything else is going to be easier. If they learn the holy grail of personal development, that everything in their life is going to be easier. And it's just not the case. It just doesn't work that way. Rather, you learn strategies, tactics, philosophies, personal beliefs, and you work towards it. You work towards becoming the ideal version of yourself, but you never actually achieve it.
And the reason I brought that up is I remember meeting somebody thinking, we're having a discussion about James Clear, and like everybody's like, yeah, this guy must be just like a machine. He just goes through the motions, and it's like, wait a minute, he's a human being. Like, just because somebody writes about this stuff, it doesn't mean that's literally how they live every moment of their life.
Right. I actually have the opinion that we write about the things that we struggle with the most. And I know that's true for me because the reason I have written about these things extensively is just because I have struggled with them pretty much my entire life. I really struggled to get things done. I was one of those people that was kind of like go with the flow, chill, relax, not really hard charging, get it done, achievement type person. But I had to become that type of person in order to do the things that I wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, this has been really cool. So I have one last question for you, which is how we finish all our interviews at the Unmistakable Creative. What do you think it is that makes somebody or something unmistakable?
So I knew you were going to ask this question, and I've thought about it quite a bit. I cheated. But I think about the people in my life that have been really unmistakable. And without fail, those people are the ones that are the most unapologetically themselves. Those people are the ones that they're not worried about what everybody's judging them about and thinking about. They are just who they are without fail. And those are the people that I look up to, and I'm sure it's the same for you.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes a really sort of fitting way to wrap up our conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us and share your story and your insights with our listeners.
Thank you, Srini. It was an absolute pleasure to be on.
Yeah, and for everybody listening, we will wrap the show with that. Next time on The Unmistakable Creative.
I have this thing about wanting to conquer the world and save the world and change the world, and I have to be honest, it has not gone according to plan. Everything is a mess. It's a big fat mess. Every single time I try to launch something, the website crashes. Every single time I post a new blog post, there's a couple of typos in it. Every single time I tell myself, I'm going to write a book. And it's going to take me 3 months, and I have the most amazing photographer, and I have the most amazing designer. Like, things just don't happen according to plan. People bail on the project. The project that was supposed to take 3 months ends up taking 17 months. And I basically have stopped fighting this urge to be Miss Perfect. I love being perfect, by the way. I'm not going to say that I'm not that person. I wanted to go to an Ivy League school. I'm that like Hermione Granger girl that like raises her hand and it's like, me, I have the answers. But in practice, in the real world, I mess up a lot. So what I've done basically is make a living out of telling the messy stories in between.
Panamanian artist Mai Carlos returns to the show to talk about turning life's messes into creative victories.